Hey, what's going on, guys? Rome Gaming here, back in another video. Today's episode, I want to go over a little infographic that I found on Reddit. Some of you guys might have already seen it, but this came up, man, I want to say this came up like a week ago, something like that. And there's a little infographic that has kind of almost tips for each boss. It's not necessarily a full-fledged guide, but it's just kind of reviews each boss in each dungeon, and it kind of talks about, you know, tips and tricks that you can do on each one of those. So I thought it might be a cool video for us to kind of review some of these bosses. You know, we'll just go through the whole list. We'll talk about tips and tricks and, you know, just kind of, I don't know, maybe rank them in terms of difficulty for each specific dungeon. But yeah, I thought it'd be kind of cool to go through all these. Pretty long lists. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. So Stonevault here, the Edna. So using the boss's arrows attack. So this is the first boss in the dungeon. And I think all these are going to be in order. So using the boss's arrows, clear a few of the spikes on the ground. Do not break all the spikes at the same time. Don't stack. So you're going to have these sort of arrows go out. So I guess this will be easier. So that's boss. And you're going to have these arrows kind of go out. Drop my mouse here, so cut me some slack. You have these arrows that go out, and there's going to be these rocks that spawn, and you have to point the arrows at the rocks. Now, the problem with this is if you do all three rocks at once, 1, 2, 3, you're going to take a huge damage over time effect, and it's effectively going to wipe the party on higher keys. So you can only take out a couple at a time on higher key levels. Now, there's also one other thing that this graphic doesn't talk about is there is a damage over time effect, and you as a healer have to handle that damage over time effect. It's actually a magic effect that will go out on the tank, and you have to dispel it right before the seismic smash goes out. So Seismic Smash will basically clap his hands, and he will pretty much one-shot the tank at higher keys. And if you don't dispel that magic effect right before the Seismic Smash, he doesn't get the absorbed shield, and he takes a ton of damage. Up next, we have Skarmorak. So read out the graphic here. Looks like the first tip is when the shards spawn, destroy only one at a time. So very similar to the rot mechanic on Edna. Whenever you destroy a shard, the group is going to take a whole bunch of damage, so you don't want to kill them all at once. And then there will be orbs that spawn on the ground, and you're going to pick up each of those orbs. You know, you only want to pick up like a couple. It's going to give you a damage and a healing increase, so only pick up 1 or 2, because if you pick up too many yourself, it's going to just do a whole bunch of damage to you. And it's not going to one-shot you, but it will kill you, you know, if you pick up too many. Okay, next we have Brock and Dorlita, so the two machinists. So step 1, focus the small guy at first, always interrupt him. Step 2, focus the big guy when the small guy runs, keep interrupting the small guy, and avoid the death cube, kill both at the same time. So yeah, both bosses have to die at the same time. So if you kill one before the other, basically it's going to be like an enrage, and it's going to be a ton of AoE damage that goes out. That's pretty much unhealable. So you always want to avoid the center. So we'll kind of draw this one out as well, maybe. So you're kind of almost in, I believe it's kind of like a star, something like that. And you will have a big cube that is sent down the middle. It goes that way, and the cube will also erupt at one point and go that way. So actually, I drew this wrong. The cube, the platform that you're standing on is more like this, right? And the cube can go this way, or the cube can go this way. So you want to avoid the center, and then there will also be the safe spots, which are the vents that are kind of on the corners of the room. And at one point during the fight, 3 of those 4 corners will turn into fire, so you have to go to the safe spot. So let's say this one catches on fire, this one catches on fire, this one catches on fire, so everybody has to walk to this corner of the room. So it's kind of like a dance that you're having to play. Then this little guy does have, I believe it's called like scrap metal or something like that. It's an interrupt that you need to kick, or your group will take a bunch of damage. So yeah, for the most part, you know, tank is just going to kind of pull them on one of these vents. They're all going to be safe at the start of the fight. 3 of the vents will then catch on fire. Then you just go to the safe vent spot and make sure you're never standing in the middle. And then the cube will go back and forth, but when it erupts in the center, it will send a lava surge up and down, so you don't want to be standing in those points. And typically I save my cooldowns in this fight, my healing cooldowns, for that big erupt, right? That's when a whole bunch of AoE damage is going to go out, is when that cube explodes. So save defenses for that phase. Then finally we have Irik here. So drop blue circles at the edge of the room. Step 2, clear the corruption by standing near a portal, but not on top of it. Step 3, avoid the death cone. Not too much on this boss. You're going to get these circles that go around you. They're kind of blue-purple. Make sure you step, or point 1 in this is the most important point. Make sure you're dropping that to the edge of the room. If you drop them in the center of the room, you're not going to be able to effectively go to a portal to drop off the corruption and then get back to the boss, back and forth. So if you're playing something like Mistweaver Monk, where you have to do damage to heal, it's really hard to be able to drop a dot off and go back to the boss back and forth if there's these puddles in the way. He does have a frontal, the death cone. Make sure to avoid that as well. And then, yeah, just drop off your dot at the portal. You just got to stay near it. It'll take the dot away. Okay, then in terms of ranking these, go ahead and do that. That'll work. So if I were to rank these, I would probably put, for Brokandorlita as number 1. I think that's the hardest mechanically with pugs and everything. I think that this boss is kind of a nightmare. Edna's going to be hard in higher keys as well, where, you know, it's just a lot of things you have to focus on as a healer. You got to do the magic dispel for the absorb shield. You got to make sure your group is breaking the rocks at the correct time, not breaking them all at once. Scarmac probably at number 3, and then Irek at number 4. Okay, up next we have the Dawnbreaker. So Shadow Crown, we got Anub-e-Kaj, however you say that, and then Rashanan. Yeah, me pronouncing these boss names is not going to get any better at any point throughout this video, so, you know, strap in for that. So Shadow Crown, basically what this boss does is she will have this sort of rotating, let's just read it out. Avoid the rotating purple beams of death, fly away 50% HP and 0% HP when she does her instant kill spell. So a little bit more going on with this boss from a healer perspective. You do have a dispel that will go out. It's going to put a dot on somebody. If you don't dispel it, that target is going to take insanely, it's going to take a ton of single target damage. And you're not going to be able to heal through it in higher keys, so you have to dispel. Now, when you do dispel, it puts out a healing absorb on all the targets, on all your allies, right? So then you have to heal through that AoE heal absorb. So easier said than done. If you're playing something like a Discipline Priest, you're probably going to struggle on this a little bit more. Anywhere that there is a heal absorb in the game and your class kind of relies on shields, it's going to make, you know, just that mechanic a little bit more difficult by nature, right? As our shields as a Discipline Priest do not, you know, remove the heal absorb effect. You still have to heal through it, right? But yeah, nothing too crazy with this boss, really. Just make sure when she does her little Dome of Death spell that you're flying off the platform and that you're, you know, then flying back on the platform, and she just kind of rotates through it a couple times, and avoid all the purple stuff on the ground. So second boss here, read it out. Purple circle equals bad. Don't get hit by the purple ball and aim as far away as possible to reduce group damage. I'm trying to remember on this boss. I guess she puts a purple circle on the ground at some point. I don't really remember that. It's not something I've really paid too much attention to, but her main mechanic is she's going to shoot this purple ball. And it has a slow sort of charge up time. It's a huge ball. You can't miss it, right? And she shoots it out. And if it hits a wall, basically it's going to do a whole bunch of AoE damage. So you want to shoot it down a straight and narrow path, and you want to get the ball as far away from your group as possible. So just to kind of draw this out, right? We got the fountain room, and we got a few hallways here. So really, the tank, what they want to do is they want to tank the boss somewhere like right here. And that way, when the purple orb goes out, it is shot down the hallway and it doesn't hit like a wall or something and explode, because if it does that, your group's pretty much going to get one shot. So that's the main mechanic there. We also have this Rashanan. So in the first phase, the barrels matter, not your DPS. So use the barrels ASAP. Number 2, in the second phase, take the webs to the edge of the platform. So most people have this down that I've run with, but in the first phase, this is, from a healer's perspective, this is a pretty difficult fight. It's just a ton of AoE damage that goes out. And it's not necessarily people just getting one shot or anything like that. It's just a lot of slow rot damage. I did a key the other day. I don't know if we messed something up, but I had to do like 1.5 million burst healing right out the gate, like the first 10 to 15 seconds to keep our group alive. So make sure on the trash before this boss, you're not wasting a whole bunch of cooldowns if you can keep from it, because the trash before this boss is actually pretty difficult. So make sure you have at least a couple of cooldowns going into this fight because you will need them. So yeah, anyways, first phase, there's going to be some barrels in the back. You just pick them up, you bring them to the boss, you drop them in front, and that's going to be a bulk of your damage is those barrels. Again, your damage does not matter in the first phase. Only really focus on the barrels. Phase 2, she'll mount up, she'll fly away. That's this little note over here. You can fly directly off the boat to the boss. So you don't have to follow the boss the whole way around, and you can grab one of the yellow orbs in the sky. You just need one to make it. Grab one orb and you can fly directly towards the platform from there. Now, one thing I did forget to talk about is the green. Now, one thing I did forget to talk about is that sort of green wave. So let me pull that up. So this will be the boss here, right? And you're on the ship and you guys are kind of fighting right through here somewhere. And one player will get a sort of wave effect on them. And what you got to do, it'll be green. You can't miss it. It'll pop up and it'll follow your character back and forth. So the wave effect will have this sort of green line on it. And then on the other side, it'll be more, I don't know, more like yellow, sort of green filled out. But there'll be a very apparent green line. And that line will kind of follow your character. And what you want to do is you want to take that line and you want to put the line on the inside of the wave. So sometimes the wave can look like this to where the line is on the left, but sometimes the line can be on the right. And if that line is on the right, then you actually need to drop it over here. Because what will happen is, let's just say that the line was on the left. This wave will shoot in that direction after you drop it off, and it will hit all your enemies standing in that direction. So this is pretty much the platform that you'll be on, right? This is the boat. The X is the boss here. And you're going to get this sort of green line along with sort of a wave effect on the side of it. And really the only thing you're worried about is the green line. When it pops up, it'll be very apparent. You'll be able to know exactly what it looks like. And what you want to do is you want to take that line and you want to put it to the inside of the wave. So this line needs to be in between the boss and it needs to be in between this wave effect over here. And what will happen is, due to the line being on the left like this means the wave will shoot to the right. So the wave is going to go that way. So that means all your allies are going to be standing over here, right? And you're not shooting it in their direction. It's shooting to the right. Now, in some cases, right, kind of delete some of this. In some cases, the line can be on the right. So in some cases, the line can be like this. We can draw the wave back like this. We can draw the wave back like this. And if you drop the line this way, or if the line shows up like this, you need to bring it right here, right? The line needs to show up right here because this means the wave is going to shoot to the left, right? And that means your allies can stand over here. Now, if you get this backwards for whatever reason, so let's say you get it backwards and you drop it like this. So the line is way over here on the right. This wave is going to shoot this direction and it's going to hit all your allies standing over here. So I am kind of ranting about this, but just in case you haven't seen this before, just make sure that the line is in between the wave and the boss, right? So the way it's on the graphic right now is incorrect. You would drop it over here to the left. The line would go here, and then the wave mechanic will go to the left, kind of like that. So yeah, anyways, look up, if that didn't make any sense, just look up another guide, but that's all the time I'm going to spend on that one. Okay, so to rank these, I would probably do, let's pull this up. We'll probably do something like, this is probably the hardest boss, Shadow Crown the second, then this guy's probably going to be the easiest boss in here. Just kind of looking at it from a healer's perspective. All right, moving on to City Echoes here. So first boss, you have to kill some mini bosses before this to get the actual boss to spawn. And long story short, I'll kind of go through this one a little quick. He has some eggs that will spawn these ads. These ads will then try to go to the boss. If the boss eats them, he's going to become stronger. So those ads will break from the eggs. They will fixate on a player. If you are the player they fixate on, move them away from the boss, because if they get near the boss, he will consume them and again, become stronger. Make sure all the DPS are focusing down those ads ASAP. And then that's pretty much it for this boss. Not too complicated. Next boss here. So Tip 1, avoid the small swirlies throughout the fight. At 100 energy, he creates a big swirly. Stay inside that one. So very similar. I don't know if you guys have played like Fortnite or anything before, like or any sort of battle royale, right? The storm kind of comes in. Very similar in this boss. You're going to be in the eye of the storm. Now, one thing on this boss is there will be a swarm, or it'd be like a dot that's put on a player. Once that dot either expires or is dispelled or whatever, it will put a swarm on the ground that you have to run away from. So if you stand in that swarm, even for 1 second on higher keys, you're pretty much dead. So make sure you're avoiding that. It does kind of rotate around the room, so you got to kind of dance with it a little. For the most part, though, this boss is just avoiding stuff. Don't stand in the stuff, and you'll be fine. Final boss here is very interesting. I think it's kind of a difficult boss, especially for pug groups. It's one that I've had issues pugging myself. Basically, what happens is these blue goops. This is probably gonna be one I have to draw out. So you got the boss here in the center of the room, and there's going to be these sort of blue goops that you have to do damage to, and you have to kill them. And when you kill them, they will spawn a blue puddle. And these blue puddles are very important because later in the fight, the boss will do a big, almost like a suck mechanic where she has to pull everybody into her. And if she pulls you in, you're going to get one shot and die unless you have an immunity. But what you can do to avoid getting sucked in is you can stand in these blue goops and, it'll just avoid you being sucked in, and it will almost just root you in place. So when she starts to do the suck mechanic, you have a couple seconds where you as the player, right, you can kind of run into these goops. It will stun you, and she won't be able to pull you in. Now, after her suck mechanic is finished, then you have to use a CC ability on one of the goops to be able to get yourself unstuck. So that's pretty dangerous in itself. But another thing that you need to be aware of as well is two of the same people can't share the same puddle, right? Everybody has to go to their own puddle. So if you and another person is running to this puddle, whoever gets there first is the one that gets it. The other person will then be kind of stuck in the middle of no man's land here, and you have to close the gap to, whatever the next closest one is. So, kind of be aware of that. Then another thing, she will put sort of a disease effect on each target. And let's see if I can kind of draw this out. So let's just say we got 3 players here, and she's going to put a disease on a target, and it does a whole bunch of taking damage. And then it will also have 2 sort of, I don't know exactly what to call it. I guess it's like waves, like puddles that will shoot out on each direction. And these can be somewhat aimed, whatever direction they start in. So you can move it vertically. So you can move it on the y-axis, but you can't like rotate where it's going to shoot out. So if it's pointed in a specific direction, that's the direction it's going. Now you can move up and down the y-axis here, right? And you can take it down here. If you want to shoot it down here, you can do that. If you want to shoot it down here, you can do that as well. But whichever direction they're pointing, that's where they're going. So you have to kind of stagger the group, because if you hit an ally with this, it's going to kill them. So what I like to do with this is I like to take care of myself first as the healer. So let's say I am this purple X down here. Excuse me. Let's say I'm a purple X right here. And let's say I have 2 melees. This boss is a little bit harder with melees. And let's say I have an ally here who's melee. So what I like to do is this disease effect will come out. These 2, the tank and melee DPS, will probably stay on the boss, right? They want to be doing damage. I will run myself all the way down here. All the way away from the group down here. And then I will dispel myself, and I will shoot the goop way down here, so I'm not accidentally hitting somebody else with it. Then from there, I kind of go back into the fight, right? And then, I'm doing damage to the boss. I'm Mist Reaver Monk. I'm healing through my damage. And, you just try to... This is where most of the damage is going to come from, so save your cooldowns for this sort of goop phase. So, yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but it made sense to me. So if I were to rank these, I would probably go something like easiest boss, second, and then the hardest boss. So not a super fun dungeon, kind of difficult to pug, but it is what it is. We got to deal with it. Up next is City of Threads. I guess they spelled this wrong. Called it Threats. First boss here is all the bosses in here are pretty hard to heal. Let me think real quick. Yes, every single boss in this dungeon is hard. This might be the hardest boss dungeon. Just every single boss is hard to heal. So if you do go into this dungeon, be ready. It's going to be a lot of HPS. First boss here, there's going to be like a circle around the boss. So the boss will be kind of in the center of the screen, and there's going to be a circle around it. Everybody has to be in that circle. If you don't, you'll be pretty much instantly one shot. And this is really a tank fight. It's a healer fight as well, but the tank is going to be the one who kind of carries this one based off of, how they ping when they move the boss. Is it easy for everybody to follow the tank as he moves the boss around the room? You as a healer, there's nothing super special here. It's just a HPS check, really. Make sure you're not getting hit by the little orbs that get shot out around your allies, and just try to heal through it. Up next is Fangs of the Queen. And this is one of the bosses that, there's so much going on. This is another insane heal check. There's so much going on, and you just have to pretty much avoid everything. There is a soak that you will do with the tank. So it kind of says it in step 2, stand on the tank when they get the big white circle. Basically what she'll do is she'll try to freeze the tank's blood, and the tank will get 10 stacks of a pretty bad dot, and allies can share the stacks of that dot if they are near the tank. So tons of mechanics going all over the place. I think the main ability to heal through is something called Dustbringer. So make sure you have a cooldown to pair with that ability. Outside of that, just try to make sure that you're not standing in the things you're not supposed to be standing in. Very hectic boss fight. Up next, we got the purple goop boss. Pretty much absorb the orbs. These orbs will kind of spawn in a circle around the boss, and they will go in towards the boss. And you want to make sure that those orbs don't touch the boss. If they touch the boss gets healed. And if you pick up one of those orbs, you do get a healing absorb put on yourself. The main thing you need to be worried about on this boss is it's called the Dark Pulse. So he has an energy bar, and when he reaches 100 energy, the Dark Pulse will go off, do a whole bunch of AoE damage. So you want to make sure you're pairing your cooldown with that Dark Pulse. Okay, so final boss in City of Threads here is... There's a lot going on with this boss. The main mechanic that you should really be aware of, there's probably 2. Number 1 is she's going to root all targets. So it'll be called Umbral Weave, and when that goes out, certain specs will be able to shift out of it. Like if you're a druid or something, you could shift out of the root. But if your spec can't do that, if you can't get out of the root, typically what you want to do is you want to have everybody stack up, and that way you guys can cleave each other's roots down. Everybody can get freed and then start to kind of move around again. Now, the other main mechanic with this boss is she will put out some little purple orbs around the room. And it took me a while I don't know why, but it took me a while to figure out exactly how these worked, because they'd kind of be shot out in like random formations, just kind of all over the place. And what she does is she will call those orbs in at some point, and they will actually go to wherever your tank is standing. So if your tank is over here and the boss is here, all of those orbs get shot at your tank. So if you're standing in the line of any of those, right? If you're standing here, wherever, it's going to hit you. And the thing that was confusing to me is I thought the orbs were supposed to go to the boss for so long, and they actually go to wherever your tank is standing. It's not necessarily where the boss is standing. So long story short, as a healer, as a DPS, you want to make sure, right, you're not standing in this path, in this path, in this path, and that path. You want to be in between an orb and your tank. So this is probably the easiest mechanic to mess up, because if those orbs do hit you, you do get one shot and you die. So make sure, probably the best place to stand, is probably going to be, if you're ranged, kind of on the outside of the room. And if you are a melee, and let's say for example, the tank is right here. If you are a melee, so when those orbs do get called back in, there's going to be a 10-yard AoE that will go around the tank. I don't know why I drew this circle around the boss. This circle should be around the tank. There's a 10-yard circle around the tank. So if you are a melee DPS, you want to make sure that you are not standing within 10 yards of your tank when those orbs get called in. So, a safe spot would probably be, back here behind the boss somewhere. That way the AoE effect is happening. The AoE effect will happen something like that, not this other red line I drew. So just be aware of that as well. Okay, now to rank these, obviously the hardest boss is going to be the final one here. Probably the second hardest boss for me is Fangs of the Queen. Third is the Purple Ooze dude. And then the first boss is probably the easiest boss to heal in here to me. Okay, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this. It's been around for a while. Make sure that you are focusing down this. You can see two bosses here. There's two bosses. You focus down this blue boss first. Then once he gets to 0% health, this boss is stunned. He takes like 200% increased damage. So that's when you lust and you pop cooldowns and you just nuke this guy down. It's not healing intensive at all. Probably the easiest boss to heal in this entire dungeon rotation. Next boss is the Mistcaller. So a fox will spawn and your group needs to handle the fox. You need to CC it and you don't need to break that CC. So you need to hex it. Druids can root it. Monks can paralysis it. Make sure that you know what your spec can do with this specific boss and use it, or with that fox that spawns, and make sure that you are CCing it when it comes out. The hard part of this fight is the balls of death that will shoot at you. You want to make sure that you're not focusing too much on the fox, and these are kind of sneaking up on you and they're kind of sniping you from a range. So make sure you're avoiding those. Then you also have to understand the little mini game, right? She's going to have these 4 patterns that pop up above these ads that spawn, and you're going to make sure that you're killing the correct ad or the odd one out. If you kill the wrong one, it's a wipe. Final boss. So this boss is huge, right? It's got like a huge AoE marker. So the first tip, the tank and the rest of the group should stay on opposite sides of the boss to make breaking the tether easier. At 70 and 40% DPS, shield down quickly. DPS to shield down quickly and interrupt. So yeah, there'll be a tether that goes out between the tank and everybody else. So when that tether goes out, you want to make sure you're running away from the tank to break that tether as quickly as you possibly can, or it's going to kill you. There will also be some ads that fixate on you. So what you want to do is I just run them to the tank, and I play Mistweaver Monk. So when the ads get close, I ring a piece myself in the tank, and then DPS just kind of cleave the ads down. You don't necessarily have to run to the tank, but you do want to run to a DPS, like a melee DPS, so they can kind of help you kill the ads. Then the main thing is going to be the shield that you guys have to break through. She will cast something called Consumption. It'll shoot out like a whole bunch of these orbs on the ground, these swirlies that you have to avoid. There's going to be a whole bunch of damage, pulsing AoE damage that goes out during that phase. So try to use a cooldown during the consumption phase. And then also when you do break the link, going back to step 1 here, the tether, she does have a new effect. She will try to suck you in, and basically there's a green circle around her. Make sure you're not getting sucked in after you break that tether. In terms of ranking this, I think Mistcaller's the hardest. I think this dude is the second, and then this one here is like 99. It's like the easiest boss in the entire game. Yeah, then Necrotic Wake here. So first boss, Blightbone. When targeted, aim the belch away from the group and kill the ads ASAP, stun and CC if needed. So he will belch on the group, and he will do a big disease effect on everybody that's hit. It'll do a little bit of damage, but the main thing is he will spawn these sort of worms or little maggots, and you have to CC and kind of kite them away from the group because they will fixate. So when that does happen, just make sure the bot or the tank is going to have to kite him around the room. So because that belch will kind of turn the ground into an area that you can't walk on anymore. So you'll kind of kite the boss around the room. You need a big area to move around. So make sure that you're aiming the belch in the direction away from the direction that you guys are kiting the boss. Pretty easy boss, to be honest. Kind of spiky if your allies do get hit by the worms, though, so be careful with that. Second boss here, basically it's kind of a weird boss because it's like not that hard until it is. So when he spawns ads, that's when the boss gets really hard, and that's when you got to really pair your cooldowns. So pair your cooldowns when the ads spawn. It's going to take everything you have. It's a very heal-intensive fight if your group doesn't know how to handle the ads properly. So best way to handle this is to have it like a Death Knight in the group that can grip the ads in, and you guys can kind of AoE them down. The boss will also have sort of a beam that he shoots out. So DBM or Little Wigs, whatever, will warn you when this is about to go off. So when you hear that, just run behind the boss. I highly recommend to stand very close to the boss during this fight, because that beam, if you are far away, will sneak up on you, and it's hard to, if if he starts to channel the beam in your direction, all of a sudden, it's kind of hard to get out of the way. So if you're on the boss right next to him, you can get from in front of him to directly behind him very easily. So yeah, use kicks, use big cooldowns on the ad spawn. Make sure you're not lusting this boss because we will need it for Stitch Flesh. So this is the hardest dance. I'm kind of doing air quotes here, but this is the hardest dance out of any boss in this list probably. And it has to be executed perfectly, or it's on hierarchies, it's a wipe if you don't do this perfectly, to be honest. So Stitch Flesh is going to be on the platform, and you're going to be killing his ad, which has a hook. And basically, the ad will try to hook you, and he'll shoot an arrow at you. And what you can do is point that arrow at Stitch Flesh and get out of the way at the last second, and the hook will basically grab Stitch Flesh off the platform, bring him down for everybody to kill. So if anything needs a graphic, it's going to be this boss. So here's the platform, and then all this is going to be the room that you're standing in, and then Stitch Flesh is going to be up here. So I'll just put him as like a green X, and then the ad that we're trying to kill is going to be down here. Now, as we're trying to kill this ad, more ads are coming in, right? They're kind of spawning, and if you get too many ads, it becomes unhealable very quickly. So I like to position myself kind of behind the boss because that hook will basically, it has a random chance to go on any member of the group, right? So let's say it goes on us, and let's say we're standing right here. The hook is going to be aimed at us, and we need to move into a position right here, right? So that the hook is now aimed at the boss. Then at the very last second, what we can do is we can aim the hook and then sidestep at the very last second, and the hook is still aimed at the boss. It will then grab the boss and it will pull him down to us. Now, there's two things that your group has to do in this phase. Actually, three things. Number one, pop cooldowns. Number two, so CDs. We need to lust. And then whoever picked up the spear, there's these weapons that you can pick up around the dungeon, but you need to make sure that you are using spear in this phase. And if it's done properly, you can normally one phase it. But if people don't, if you're not lusting, if people don't use the spear, people aren't using cooldowns, whatever, things happen. Normally it goes into a second phase, right? So if boss doesn't die, kind of delete some of this stuff here. So if boss does not die, then he will go back to the platform. So now we got to do the whole dance all over again, and we have to hook him down once again. Now, when he goes back to the platform, it times up perfectly every single time. The second he goes back to the platform, this ad, if you don't kill it, he will cast another hook on another party member. So basically what you should do is leave this ad to like 5% health. Then when the boss goes back up, he will cast hook again. You can hook the boss back down almost instantly every single time. Then as he's hooked back down, another ad will spawn, kill this ad, and then kill the boss. So basically every single ad down here, you're gonna make sure you're getting 2 hooks out of, right? If you're getting 2 hooks out of every ad that's down, you will pretty much always be able to keep Stitch Flesh down here on the ground. So yeah, you might be able to understand very quickly why this is a pug nightmare. Then final boss here is very easy. Basically I actually haven't done this in a few years, but because I play healer, but he will always hook a DPS down to go to a lower platform. You have a little mini game where you have to run through some swirlies unless they've changed it. Then you press a portal and you go back up. You might have to kill some ads. I can't remember, to be honest. I haven't done it in a couple years. Just to read it out here, ranged players spread out. Do not dispel the frozen debuff until everyone is outside the big ice circle. That's very important, actually, because if you dispel the debuff before everybody is outside of the ice ring, you will get, everybody who's in that ring will become rooted the second you dispel that one person. So basically, if you see a big blue circle pop up, make sure to run out of it. Healer, you have to dispel the person who has the who's frozen in place. Of course, certain specs like hunters can disengage it. I believe druids can shift out of it, all that good stuff. There's also a comet storm that goes down. Make sure you're not overlapping that with somebody else's storm. It will kind of follow you in a trail. So just make sure you're not running into each other with that. Then yeah, step 4 is the Gauntlet. So one of the easier bosses in here. Okay, so to rank these, I think the Frost Mage boss here at the very end is going to be the easiest by far, as long as you can dispel. Not too bad, as long as you don't lose DPS, because he does get a shield that you got to kind of burn through. If you lose DPS, it does get kind of difficult to do that. Stitch Flesh can be one of the easiest bosses if you know what you're doing. This could be the second easiest boss. It just depends. But for the purpose of this video, we're talking about pugs. Most groups, this is going to be the hardest boss, especially if you're pugging. I would probably put this boss as the third hardest, and then Blightbone as the second hardest. Excuse me. The third easiest, and then Blightbone being the second easiest. Okay, 2 dungeons left. We are getting pretty close, getting kind of tired here. We got Siege of Boralus. So I've never had too many major issues with Siege. I know a lot of people have been, but I haven't gotten the key a whole bunch, to be honest. So I haven't had to spend too much time in here, thankfully. But apparently people hate this one, so let's kind of review it real quick. So Red Hook is pretty easy. Basically, there's going to be these bombs that sort of spawn around the room. He will fixate on somebody, and you need to run him through those bombs, basically, to do damage to him. Just to read it out here, first kite the boss into bombs, and then use your cooldowns, run when he starts sucking, and then cleave adds. So very simple. He fixates you, run him into the bombs, nuke him down. Not super healing intensive. One thing to be worried about is if he does get somewhat close to you, he seems to have like a huge melee range. So just don't let him get close at all, because it will surprise you how far, you know, he can actually hit you. So yeah, pretty much it for that boss. Up next, we have a Lockwood. There's a lot more going on to this boss than what this says. Avoid crap and kill ads. So we'll kind of cover that. Basically, Lockwood will put a dot on a player if, I believe it's 2 conditions have to be true. There has to be like a CC on the boss, like a hamstring, some sort of slow effect always has to remain on the boss. And there also always has to be a player near the boss. So if those 2 conditions are true, then she will not put a dot, a huge single target dot on an ally. Now, if for whatever reason you guys miss a CC or whatever, and she does put a dot on one of your allies, they're going to take huge single target damage. And when you start to get into higher keys, they're dead within 2 to 3 seconds. So you really need to be able to track that somehow with a, in my cell guides, I've got a targeted spell list. This is on it. It is something that you need to track in higher keys, because if that does go out, people are pretty much dead instantly. Then outside of that, this graphic is pretty correct. Avoid the stuff and kill the ads. So not too much going on there, but you need to be very aware as a healer of what that dot is. Up next, we have a Dark Fathom here. So when the boss casts Tidal Surge, stand on the opposite side of the statue, try sticking with the tank. So I guess I'll have to draw this one out too. So basically, you're going to be in a room. Let's just say the square is the room. There's a fountain in the middle, and these huge waves will spawn. So basically, you and your group need to be standing here. The fountain in the middle will block the wave as it comes through. And if you're standing on this side of the fountain, it won't hit you and you'll be fine. One thing to note is, I believe once you start to get into Mythic, I believe 2 waves start to spawn. So this wave will spawn. It'll go all the way through the room, right? And then another wave will spawn on this side. It'll be random. You know, you'll have to figure that one out as they spawn. But so then a wave will come, let's just say, for example, from this side of the room. So you have to move here. Now, the hard part is there's also another mechanic. There's these sort of, is it like an ice ground mechanic that will go onto players? And if you accidentally drop the ice right here, right, it can be kind of difficult to get around the fountain. So if you do get that ice effect on you, you're going to make sure you're trying to drop it off to the sides. You don't want to put that around the fountain, because it can be difficult to, you know, move around it to avoid these waves. All right, final boss here. So there's going to be a dot that you have to dispel. Basically, it's like 3 or 4 rooms that you have to run to, and there's these tentacles that spawn. So your group will go in, they'll focus down each individual tentacle, as they do have to be killed in order to kill the boss. So you don't actually kill the boss itself, you just kind of kill its tentacles. After you kill the tentacles in that specific room, somebody will hop in the cannon, shoot the boss, and you will go to the next room of tentacles. So there is a magic effect that will go out from a healer standpoint, and you have to dispel it. So sometimes the dot will go on a tank, sometimes it'll go on you, sometimes it'll go on a DPS. If it's on the tank, I normally just leave it on the tank because they can soak the dot just fine. I mean, I still dispel it, but it's the second one that I dispel. So I prioritize myself first. If the dot goes on me, I dispel myself first. And then if it goes on a DPS, I prioritize them second. It is a pretty hefty dot. They're going to be taking a whole bunch of damage. Again, 2 dots go out at once. And once those 2 dots are removed, more dots will come out. So you just got to make sure you're staying on top of it, because if you get behind on dispels, you're going to be getting 3, 4, 5 people with these dots, and they're going to be taking a ton of unhealable damage. Then already, the boss is already hard to heal by itself. One other thing to note is when you do dispel somebody, basically when they're dispelled, it's going to do an AoE knockup to anybody who is standing around them. So if you have allies around you before you're about to dispel yourself, make sure you move out of the way and then dispel, because it will knock all of you back if you're dispelling them, if you're dispelling players while they're next to other players. Then the final tip for this boss is on the boat platform, there will be some line of sight issues. You can kind of climb the stairs on the boat a little bit, so you're kind of overlooking everybody else, and you're going to run into less line of sight issues. Okay, then finally the last dungeon here, Grim Batol. The first boss is going to be this sort of dragon looking boss here, and the first effect he's going to do is he's going to put a earth effect around some random party members, and that earth effect is a circle that will then be dropped onto the ground, and you have to move that to the side of the room. And if you don't, that earth effect will be dropped in the center of the room, and you're going to have to run over it or around it, which is going to be very difficult to do because this is a very movement intensive fight. So if you get that sort of earthen effect on you, it's a circle. It'll kind of pop up around your character's feet. Make sure you're dropping that off to the side of the room. Up next, there's going to be, you can kind of read it here, when the room turns purple, get into the safe lane. So there's going to be like 3 or 4 lanes that pop up, and 3 lanes at random will be purple. So you want to make sure that you're running to the lane that is not purple, as that will be sort of the safe lane. So just to kind of draw this out quickly, 1, 2, 3. You have 4 lanes here. So the boss, let's say you guys are here fighting the boss, and then this lane turns purple, this lane turns purple, and this lane turns purple. You and the boss, you got to drag him all the way over to this lane, right? So if you have all those circle earth effects in the middle of the room, it's going to be difficult to traverse to this lane over here on the far side of the room. Up next, we have Forge Master. So he's got a few different phases here. He's got an axe, a dual, and a mace phase. So they're not too bad, really. The axe and the dual phase, obviously, I mean, you're going to have to focus heals on the dual phase. The axe phase isn't too bad either. So both of these phases, just make sure you're popping a mini cooldown. The main one you got to worry about is the mace phase. And that's where the tank has to kite the boss. So if the tank doesn't kite the boss during the mace phase, he's going to get one shot. So you guys kind of got to have a platform to kind of run him around for that specific phase. Now, from a healer's perspective, the main thing you got to worry about is the Molten Flurry. So he will cast this, and it will do a ton of AoE damage. It'll be pretty difficult to heal through. So make sure you're pairing your healing cooldowns with that Molten Flurry. Okay, third boss here isn't too bad, really. There will be these ads that spawn randomly, and they will fixate a target. Your DPS they can be CC'd, they can be slowed, they can be stunned. So you need to make sure that you're focusing those ads down, because if they do reach your target, it will wipe the group. From a healer's perspective, there's not too much to worry about. There are a few curses that will go out, so you want to make sure that you're bringing some form of curse dispel. Those curses are like a healing absorption, and you want to make sure that you are either, dispelling that, or you're healing through. You're kind of focusing those specific targets to get through that healing absorption. Outside of that, there's like a frontal. There's some stuff that you shouldn't be standing in, so avoid that. And to be honest, I haven't had too many issues with this boss. Final boss here isn't too bad, really. I thought at the start of the season that this is going to be one of the harder bosses. I don't know. It hasn't been too bad to me. It is a little healing intensive. Will be interesting to see it on higher tyrannical keys. Who knows? Maybe this will end up being a pretty hard boss. But right now, I've not struggled with it too much. Basically, we're going to have that sort of battle royale sort of mini game we're playing where you got to run into the safe zone. There's going to be a collapsing circle that everybody has to run into. If you're not in that circle, you're going to take a ton of damage. And what's going to happen is when you get into that safe zone, there's going to be 3 people in your group who get sort of a purple swirly on them. You're going to make sure that those 3 people are spread out and not overlapping. And you want to try to make sure that you're not positioning yourself within their purple swirly effect, right? Because you're going to take damage if you're overlapping with that. So the first time that happened to me, I was kind of freaking out like, oh no, what do I do with this purple effect on me? Do I run it out of the group? There's nothing you can do about it. 3 people are going to get it. Just try to spread out as best you can and heal through that. So when those 3 purple swirlies do come out, that's going to be when you pop your healing cooldowns, and that's going to be the phase that you really need to pump through. There's also some tentacles on the ground. Make sure you're not running into them. You can kind of run around them, but don't run into them, because if you do, it is a one-shot. Then for Tank specifically, I believe he does have a knockback effect, and I believe it's called Crush, and he can knock you into a tentacle. So be careful. Make sure your back is not directly to a tentacle and you get knocked into it. All right, guys. Then shout out to World of Duckcraft. He's the one who made this infographic for us to review. So thank you very much, World of Duckcraft. Go ahead and check them out. Really appreciate this. It had quite a bit of detail. Obviously didn't have everything. I mean, if it had everything, this would probably be like 4 times as long as what it is. So this is the perfect little infographic to be able to review. So again, thank you, World of Duckcraft, for making this infographic. Then, of course, a quick shout out to our patrons here. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you guys for believing in the channel. Our channel has really blown up over the past few months, and we're just trying to kind of continue this momentum. So if you find any of these videos useful or helpful and want to continue to try to make this content free for everybody to consume, please consider supporting the channel. We would really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.